I am 21 years old. I'm 21 years old and on the stage and about to tell strangers in the audience a very personal story of mine. Actually, the 18-year-old me wouldn't even believe this if I told her that I'm on stage right now, because the 18-year-old me didn't think that I'd still be alive at 21 years old. The 18-year-old me wanted out of this life because it was way too cruel, she had too many hardships, and she just didn't really like the thought of being alive anymore. So you're probably wondering what happened during those 3 years of my life, and more importantly, how did she survive? But in order to get there, I could tell you a simple answer, but instead, let's delve a bit into my history. So, the first time I self-harmed was when I was 11 years old. And at 15, I relapsed and self-harmed again. I had depression all throughout high school, and I also had mood swings that I couldn't really talk to anyone about. I never really had many friends, and shame and sadness really overtook me, and it resulted in a shy, timid girl who would sit at the back of the classroom, and she wouldn't really know what to do, how to seek for help. During that time, it was very difficult because I was just going through so much, and as someone who has depression, you just think that there's no such thing as hope. Unfortunately for me, I ended up doing better in my HSC marks, my ATAR, than I expected. And that did end up taking me here to the University of Sydney. I chose to study secondary education. But the sad reality is that when you come here to study university, you don't just lose your past self. The baggage of what accumulated of sadness, of emptiness, of not wanting to live ended up coming with me. The baggage followed me. Sometimes I like to think of it as this. The decayed corpse of my past self clings to me constantly, and it whispers at my ear, "You're never going to be good enough. No one's going to really like you." And that's unfortunately what I tend to hear most of my days while I'm alive. And it was during the second year of my university degree that I came to a breaking point. I completely collapsed during my second years of studies because self-harm thoughts and suicidal thoughts came back to me again. And it got so bad that I even threw up before one of my education tutorials back in 2024. And I couldn't even sleep at night. But this time I did something different. Instead of keeping it all to myself, which I've done for the past 19 years because it's a very shameful thing to admit to, I decided to confide in my tutor, Grant, about my history of depression and how I've never really sought help from anyone. And I told him all these personal things about me, and he sent me an email, advised me that the university offers 6 free counselling sessions. This was the first time I'd ever done proper counselling. The first time was when I was accused of having autism as a kid and it just traumatized me. But I went to this counselling session, and it was there when things became very difficult. But it was a change in my life. And so then I met my counsellor, Josh, and he advised me that it would be very good and beneficial for me if I chose to socialize more with my peers and finally confront my fears. Because for me, I like to avoid stuff. I like to stay still. I don't really like to move into paths of uncertainty. And so with that in mind, I did end up volunteering at the university for the history department last year. And before I volunteered, I was attending weekly counselling sessions for a while. And during those counselling sessions, it was like a battle against my own inertia, because to go through those sessions, you really need to confront on very uncomfortable truths about yourself. You're telling this counselor all this information that you're very ashamed of, that you don't want anyone knowing. And yet there's a reflective process where you try to work out with your counselor how to get to that better state of mind. And it was during those counseling sessions that I realized the only person that can really change my life and the way I think about life and how long I'll live for is really up to me. No one else is going to decide my future. It is ultimately going to be up to my own decisions. But I do have people in this life, like my counselor, who is going to help me, give me advice, and get me to that point. And so the sessions began, and it was so goddamn uncomfortable. But it did result in a very good thing. And in fact, it led to me making more future decisions that were very different to what the 18-year-old me had in mind. And so, volunteering was also like that. When I volunteered for the history department, socializing with people, it was also very goddamn awkward. But something else happened there when I was volunteering. I also fell in love. And the person who I met there is still with me today. In fact, he's sitting somewhere over there in the audience. Hi, darling. And it hasn't been easy for him. He's had to deal with a lot from me, my mood swings, my depressive thoughts. But he's been with me every step of this way, and he's really been encouraging to me taking this step. And so, after a couple of months passed, I also decided to make another change in my life. I decided to go on medication. Now, you've got medication to treat, depression. You have different types, and I decided to go on sertraline, as advised by my GP. It made me awfully sick during the first 2 to 3 weeks, and I felt a lot of uncertainty about taking sertraline. So ultimately, I stopped taking it. And that was a bad idea because you should not stop taking a medication like that just out of the blue. And at the same time, I also had papers from my GP about going to see a psychologist. Now, at the time, I felt very ashamed. I look at the papers and it says I've got major depression disorder. And I think, oh God, no. I don't want to see it. I don't want to admit to this feeling that I have serious issues. And so I put those papers hidden away in a drawer. But ultimately, the time came, 2025 comes, and I realized I need to get back on medication. Instead of going back on sertraline, I choose Lexapro, which I'm currently on. And I also decided to go see a psychologist. When I went to go see my psychologist for the first time, he looked at my referrals and he was like, well, you got referred 1 year ago. You're a slow one, aren't you? I was just like, yeah, I'm very slow. I like to avoid stuff. And ultimately, I also did a couple of things this semester that's also been changes in my life. I'm now the treasurer of the Education Society at the University of Sydney. And this semester, I also undertook a very big event that I've never really done in my life before. So does everyone here know Lifeline? The service? Yeah. I woke up at 6 a.m. to meet this group of people at Hyde Park, and we walked for 9 kilometers because for the Out of the Shadows walk, it's to raise awareness for suicide. And I will probably continue to do so for the rest of my life because it's something that I've personally experienced, and I choose to remember that day for people who have lost their lives to suicide. And another thing is that I also got a tattoo on my left arm. So I've got scars on my left arm, and currently, this shows clear enough, I've now got a koi fish covering it. Took 4 hours, $960, a lot of pain, but that pain was worth it. Because that koi fish, to me, represents courage despite hardship. and perseverance despite going through very difficult times. And so, ultimately, what my story is trying to say is that I came to realize that in life, when you lean on others, when you get help from others, you realize that there's a lot of hope in this world, after all. And for me, my scars don't just realize something that I'm ashamed about, but they show me and they spread the message that I went through a lot of pain. I battled a long way with my mental health, and I came out of it, not broken, unbroken, resilient, and full of hope. And also, another thing that I wanted to say is that when you have visible scars like mine, you're obviously going to feel a lot of shame and stigma from it. And it takes a lot to tell people, because they can also see it too, it's quite visible. But at the end of the day, they show that you truly came out of this as a survivor. And that's why I'm standing here as a survivor. And so tonight, I'm finally going to set this weight down, and the message that if I can stand up here and tell my own story, I want people in the audience, strangers, friends alike, to think that if she can be up there telling her own story, then one day I can share mine as well. Because despite all the clouds that exist in my head, the rain that falls down on me every day, I have learned that it's okay to dance in both rain and sunshine. And that it's a truly powerful thing when you talk about stories like mine, because it's such a stigmatized thing that no one really knows about it. And when you talk about it, it really opens up the conversation to a whole new level about mental health. And the reason for why I chose to do secondary education and become a teacher is because I know that in the future, there's going to be a student in my classroom who sits at the very back, just like I used to, and struggle with their own thoughts. And for me, I will know how exactly to help that student, because I believe in the power of hope. And so, here I am, as a survivor.